Welcome to The Power of the P, the podcast designed to help you become empowered in your truth, free of fear. I'm E.L. Brooks, your host, here to bring you expert advice and effective tools based on neuroscience to help you deal with all the stressors in life, relationships, and work. I'm here to keep you off that struggle bus through the power of the P. Are you ready? Then let's go. Welcome to The Power of the P, episode number 15. Thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time, let me explain the format of the show. It's like a Dear John life advice show, except for I'm EL, so it's Dear EL, where followers and subscribers send in questions of things that they're struggling and dealing with, and I'll pick one of those questions and give you some insight and provide some effective tools that are usually backed in neuroscience, not always, and I'll offer one key takeaway at the end to log into your memory to help you become more resilient and emotionally stable. The show focuses on what I call the 3 E's: empowerment, emotional intelligence, and efficiency. And we'll also be tapping into financial literacy. So statistically, a lot of people's emotional issues at the core are financially related, right? So the perception around what they don't have, otherwise a feeling of lack and feeling less than, our financial positioning around uncertain times creates uncertainty, which can lead to anxiety and depression. And it's really a scarcity mindset, right? 60% of Americans get diagnosed with illnesses. And one of the leading causes, unbeknownst to a lot of people, of those illnesses is financial stress. Again, when we drill down to the core, it's really a feeling of lack around a scarcity mindset. So our show is really around tools and strategies to better prepare you for anything and all things, right? Any and all scenarios, to better prepare your mindset really to be abundant by unlocking mental discord. And it's really to know that you matter and that you're special. And we show you how to tap into that specialness by exposing certain knowledge that creates awareness so that you can start to take agency over your mind, body, and align with your soul. So let's get into episode number 15. So this episode, we received more of the same letters of topics that we already covered, so we don't like to regurgitate things, right? But we did receive a letter from Connor G, who wanted to know what books that I've read that has gotten me to a place to have and experience inner peace. And for me, Connor, it's a lot of different topics, man. It's like all of these different topics are around perception. I study different modalities, but there are a few key staples that I will mention today, right? I try to read a book a month, and that may not sound like a lot, but I'm kind of old school and I read to really comprehend. So I write and mark up in all of my books. There's no audio books for me. Like I like to really like visually, I'm a visual learner. So I mark things, I reread things to really take in the information so that I can apply it, right? So the key to knowledge is only useful and powerful when you apply it, right? So you have to act on that knowledge. And I can actually do a whole entire show of all the books that have really influenced my life, but I'm going to just mention a few that just came off the top of my head. So for me, this is a really, really cool one, right? The 4 Agreements, being impeccable with your words, have really influenced and changed my behavior and really made an impact in my life. Another one is The Alchemist. Really, really deep read. You have to read this probably like 2 or 3 times to really get it. A simpler one, but very impactful, is The Art of Not Giving an F, right? In my current reads, I'm currently reading How to Win Friends and Influence People, because I like to continue my leadership skills. And, I do a lot of John Maxwell stuff, but I like to also just, divvy up with different authors and stuff like that. It's a really, really good book that I read a long time ago, but I wanted to refresh myself. And I also, Connor, I queue up my books. I already know what my book after this one is going to be. It's going to be Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, Meditations. I forget who the author is, but I often reflect and reference a lot of Marcus Aurelius because he is very stoic. I'll even reference it in this episode because we're going to be talking about self-reflection and all these other different things. But meditation is one of the things that I reflect on, little excerpts, but I actually have never read the whole entire book. So that's my next book after How to Influence Friends and influence people. You see, Connor, I'm all about mindset and integration, right? To close that gap of who we truly are and who we think we need to be in order to survive, right? That survival version of ourselves is usually tied to our egos and our shadows around our wounded inner child. And that causes us to strike out due to fear and unprocessed pain. And that causes 80%, again, 80% of the population to live below the support line of life, below the line of accountability and responsibility. You see, an inflated ego removes us from our true authentic self. It removes us from vulnerability, which is the gateway to true connection to self and to others. And when you connect back to yourself, that's when you start to thrive, right? That's when you 10x your life. And that is truly possible for everyone that's listening, every society. We can all achieve this, right? But we have to start reprogramming our mind. And that's by reading, by being associated with those with a higher energy around integrity, by having role models to emulate, right? You see, every person is capable of reprogramming themselves back to what I call love, back to our basis, back to our default, away from this lack and scarcity mindset. But you usually have to have like a mentor or coach to achieve this, because you as an individual don't know what you don't know, right? But what you need to know is that change is possible for all of us. I'm more convinced of this possibility after my recent visit to Japan. I have to say that it's the safest big city that I've personally visited to date. And I've been around the world a couple times, different places. But I believe in collective consciousness, and there's an energy that I felt that was unlike any other energy that I felt before, especially when I was in the Shibuya crossing, which is kind of like New York's Times Square, right? But a 10x version of that. People literally on top of each other. Phones were out, though. Purses were open. Valuables were exposed. Yet there was no feeling of fear. It was only safety. It was kind of bizarre. It was like beautiful to witness. So, this episode, we're going to explore what I believe is the foundation to why Japan is so clean and, more importantly, so safe. So, like I said, I just returned from Japan, and I have to tell you that I had an amazing experience, right? It's all of what everyone talks about. Japan has been one of those things, one of those places that has eluded me because of my own lack of balance back in the day, right? I was a workaholic. I didn't know how to create what I call now work life balance or work life harmonies. So I would often pass up on these opportunities, even though I love traveling abroad, right? And so I had four amazing opportunities throughout my lifetime to visit Japan and do it on another level. When I say on another level, you might be able to relate to this, right? Anytime that you go abroad, and if you have a friend that lives over there, or you're cool with some of the locals, it's a whole different experience, right? It's on another level, right? The first time I went to Australia, my friend Jimmy lived out there and took me to obviously all of the touristy stuff, but all these little nooks and crannies that you would just never get to experience if you didn't know any of the locals, right? So I had four opportunities to do it on another level in Japan, right? The first one, I was dating one of Prince's dancers because I was in the entertainment industry, right? And she was on tour with Prince, and she invited me to come out to Japan. They were doing like several dates, and she's like, and she had done it before, right? And she's like, Japan is just one of those places, you're gonna love it, because she knew that I hadn't been before, right? But I passed on that, right? And the second time, my friend Curtis Harmon, who actually I just connected with because he's still out there, but at the time when he moved out there like 30 years ago, I'm dating myself, right? Um, he was a DJ here, a prominent DJ here in LA, and got recruited to go to Japan and ended up staying out there, ended up running like some of the hottest clubs. And he was like, E man, I'm over here. I'm killing it. Come over. I got you. Um, and I passed on that, right? The third time I had a label, and Gangstar was on my label, and they were on tour with Rage Against the Machine and Dilated Peoples. And I also managed Guru on the side, and he also knew that I had never been to Japan. And he's like, dude, you know, got some special guests. I think it was going to be like Beastie Boys on tour with them on some of these special shows or whatever. In Japan, I think was one of them. He's like, man, come to Japan. I got you, right? Passed on that.
That's the main one that I regret, because I was like, I did the shows here in LA, and I was like, I know that show was probably going to be off the hook. And then finally in 2020, I wanted to bring my kids there and connect with Curtis, who's now goes by the name of Muhammad Abdul Salam, because he's a Muslim now. But I wanted to experience that with my boys, my two sons, and we were in the process of booking the vacation when obviously the world shut down, right? And so I was really looking forward to experiencing what people call the cleanest and safest place in the world, right? To see for myself what the fascination is all around Japan. So if you literally Google why is Japan so safe and clean, you'll get the following. And let me pull this up for a second so I can read it to you verbatim, right? So it says Japan is known for being clean and safe for a number of reasons, including culture, values, that's a key word, modern infrastructure, and personal responsibility. So let's lock in on culture, values, and personal responsibility, right? So, culture, cleanliness is a core part of Japanese culture and is taught to children in school and by their families. For example, students are taught to take pride in their surroundings and leave their shoes and lockers at school, like religion. Buddhism and Shintoism, right? Japan's two main religions also contribute to cleanliness, right? Shintoism emphasizes purification rituals, such as washing your hands and mouths before entering shrines. Shrines and temples are very big there, and I forget the difference. So I was taught the difference, but offhand, while I'm doing this episode, I can't really recall because I didn't really write it down. But there's a difference between shrines and temples. I'm getting off topic. Next is infrastructure. Japan's modern infrastructure, including wastewater treatment, also contributes to its cleanliness. And the other one I want to focus in on is personal responsibility, right? Japanese people are conscious trash users who take their trash home with them instead of littering, right? It's literally one of the cleanest I saw. I mean, obviously, I saw some trash, but like I'm saying, the streets were clean, the roads were clean, right? There was no potholes. Like there was really pride in their surroundings, personal responsibility on all levels, right? They also try not to let people into their homes if they haven't cleaned themselves. In safety, Japan is considered one of the safest countries in the world with low crime rates, right? And travelers often leave belongings unattended in cafes and bars. And I did that, believe it or not. I was in the hotel, which is a little bit more safer, but I had to run upstairs and do some things. And because of the time difference, I was still doing some work here in the States. It's a 12, forget 14-hour difference or something like that. So I had to run down upstairs, do some things, and I left my computer unattended and didn't even think twice about it because again, it was that energy that I was experiencing of safety, and I wasn't caught up in this fear of and scarcity mindset that we typically have here in the States. So I became one with the people because I was fascinated by my experience, right? So you see, I've always been an observer, but now it's on another level because I'm observing to eliminate, adapt, and improve, right? Because there's a foundation to everything that we do, right? Everything that we do sits on top of a strategy. So there's this discovery process to achieve the things that we witness that align and resonate with us. Where we falter, though, is around not having an open mind, right? To eliminate, adapt, and improve. And it's usually around an inflated ego, an ego that doesn't feel the need to change. And that means that we're not really taking personal responsibility or accountability for things when you actually break it down. When I look back around all of my moments in decline, right, it's always been around an inflated ego that was unable to assume responsibility. I was playing the victim, and you never win when you're the victim because you're blaming others, which means that you're giving up control over your own life. And that's survival. That's surviving. It's not thriving. In this reality, if you want to thrive, you need to master two worlds, right? It's your external salacious world, right? The world that attracts and distracts, right? And your internal world, which is the most important, where all the magic and all the answers reside, right? It's the magical world. And the only way to master that world is to actually conquer the outer world, right? The outer world where we actually become the hero and the shero, never the victim, because the victim surrenders control and the hero, shero, commands control. So here's a key tip. If you're depressed, right, it means that you're living in the past. And if you're anxious, it typically means that you're living way out in the future, right? When you are at peace, say that again, when you're at peace, you're actually living in the present, right? You're living in the present moment. When you're in the present moment, this allows you to self-reflect, right? Marcus Aurelius talks about his self-reflection rituals in the meditation, where every single night he would often make sure and reflect on his actions for the day to make sure that he was aligning to the person that he wanted to be, right? And this is how you can eliminate, adapt, and improve to align to your true authentic self, right? Closing that gap of who you want to be and who you think you should be in the present moment that is creating the survival actions, right? And you really want to really close that gap. And the only way to do that is to tap into your inner self, to become present in the moment so that you can actually start to self-reflect and make these corrections and eliminate, adapt to improve. We as a society have too much toxic masculinity. That's both in the men's side and on the women's side, because we have no more rite of passage rituals that instill the proper values and principles, right, that guide us and govern our behavior and our actions, right, that helps us align with our true authentic self, that help us become accountable and responsible. So we typically develop 4 personas as humans, right? We have our lover persona, the magician, right? That's how we move in and out of all of these different personas. Our sovereign persona, and of course, our warrior, right? And we can never get to be our sovereign if we don't learn how to tame our warrior. And the one thing that tames our warrior energy is bringing it into balance with our lover. And the only way to do that is to tap back into our love energy by removing our fear and our scarcity, right? And in order to do that, you have to have a foundation, right? You need to have real knowledge around what a true warrior is meant to be, right? A true warrior has discipline. A true warrior always follows principles. So let's use the samurai warrior as an example. And if you go back in ancient times, right, there's this thing known as the Bushido Code, right? The Bushido Code is a set of ethical principles that govern the behavior and conduct of all the samurai warriors on, and here's a key, on and off the battlefield. So samurais were once known as bushi in the early origins, and their role was focused primarily on serving the local lords. And eventually, they became known as the samurai, the true elite warriors serving the powerful feudal lords known as daimyos. I think I'm pronouncing that right, right? Daimyo, I do believe. And in exchange for land and status, right? So for all samurais, the Bushido Code was the way of the warrior. Now, I mention this because we're going to connect the dots back to Japan, right? So the Bushido Code was rooted, talk about rooting and foundation, right? In Confucianism, influenced by Zen, Taoism, Buddhism, and Shintoism, right? Going back to Japan, Buddhism and Shintoism, right? And those were the principles and virtues that were rooted in honor, integrity, courage, self-discipline. It had 7 virtues, right? So the first one was integrity. Second one was courage. Third one is key is benevolence. That's kindness. Fourth one was respect. Fifth was honesty. Sixth was honor. And 7 was loyalty. And these 7 principles were the guiding forces and the moral compass. That's the important part. The moral compass for all the warriors. Now, all samurais had self-masteries of weapons and, more importantly, self-mastery of the mind. And those were the 2 foundations, right, that molded the warriors to be able to face any and all challenges. So I want to tell a story. It's a story about a samurai. And the story goes like this. There was a samurai who was ordered to revenge the killing of a master samurai. So he had to track down the other warrior who killed the master samurai, right? So he waited until the warrior was in an uncompromising position. And as the story goes, he was waiting for the warrior to do number 2 in the woods. So that's uncompromising, right? Taking a dump in the woods. And so as the warrior was dumping in the woods, the samurai approached him. Now, in following the values and principles, he announced why he was there to make sure that he had the right warrior, right? And then he gave the warrior the option to take his own life through an act known as seppuku or harakiri, right? And the warrior refused. So the samurai prepared to execute the warrior when all of a sudden the warrior spat in the samurai's face. And remember, the samurai's actions are governed by a set of principles and values. And one is that you can only kill in honor, not in ego. And the other warrior knew this. So when the warrior spat in the samurai's face, he knew in that moment that he would be killing in personal revenge and not killing in honor. So the samurai had to let the warrior free and then tracked him down a few days later. And I've heard the story told in different ways, but the samurai eventually killed the warrior in honor and not in ego. You have to remember that all ancient principles and values were meant to align you with your soul, to move you beyond the egoic mind, right? So in my experience as an observer, I've seen 2 impediments that typically lead people to have a lack of progress or a lack of being able to face any and all challenges, right? Really a lack and scarcity mindset due to the egoic mind that does not allow for self-reflection. One of those impediments I call the journey of the seed, where there's a lack of integrity, self-respect, loyalty, and honesty. And the other I call the baby elephant, where there's a lack of courage, benevolence, and honor. Now, if you take all of those lacking qualities and values, those 7 lacking qualities and values are actually the Bushido code, right? So the journey of the seed and the baby elephant, those lacks add up. When you fill in those values, those missing values and principles, those add up to be the Bushido code. So let's uncover the journey of the seed. So much like a seed that falls from a tree, that seed is now vulnerable to the environment, right? To the elements of the environment. That seed is more likely to blow away and be swayed by the winds, much like an individual that has no values and principles to guide them, right? And until that seed sprouts roots into the ground, until that seed becomes rooted or grounded, right? We've all heard the term, that person is grounded, right? That's kind of what it means, it refers to, right? But until that happens, the seed is at risk, right? Much like a person's character is at risk without the guidance of these values and principles, right? That govern their actions, much like the Bushido Code guided the samurai's actions. So as you journey through life, right, the sooner you're able to anchor down and sprout roots around core values and principles, the more stable you will become because you will be establishing a foundation, right? You've heard the expression, if you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything and everything, right? That's because you're not anchored. You have no foundation, right? And in the martial arts, they talk about the first important thing is your stance. If you can't stand properly, you can't properly apply any of the moves because you're compromised. So this brings me to the second impediment, which I call the baby elephant, right? So a baby elephant that is used in a zoo or in a circus is typically held down or anchored down by a stake in the ground and a chain. And as that baby elephant grows into an adult elephant, that very same stake and chain is still often used because the grown elephant is not only physically anchored, but more importantly, mentally anchored, right? It still thinks that it's a small baby elephant within the mind, and that scarcity mindset holds it back from realizing that it can easily break away. It's stuck in the past, much like a lot of humans that are anchored in their past pain, right? They're chained down by unprocessed life experiences that are keeping them in a holding pattern. So we often need to see what sprouts we have grown, right? What sprouts we planted, what seeds we planted. The sprouts that we have grown, we need to question them to make sure that they're not holding us back, right? We need to be able to reflect on what's allowing us to align with our truth, what's allowing us to grow versus what's still remaining as an impediment to our successes and our goals. Now, whether I'm working with my personal team around leadership or I'm working as a consultant with individuals around high performance or working with a corporation around leadership and high performance, I usually use this same formula. It is A, where are you now? B, where do you want to be versus where do you need to be, right? What are the known impediments? Because a lot of times we have awareness of certain things. What are the unknown impediments? That's where I come in and do a series of questions to unlock a lot of things to create. This is a discovery process to create more awareness, right? Because you don't know what you don't know. And I do a series of questions that unlock the hidden answers, right? So that we can have a pathway to meet the goals that we have set out for ourselves or as a corporation. And so a major issue that I've found that sits underneath both the journey, well, this is more for individuals, but both the journey, impediment number one, the journey of the seed, and impediment number two, the baby elephant, is a woe is me attitude, right? It's the victim that never wins, right? Because the victim surrenders control and it blames. And this is a person that lacks core values and personal responsibilities. Remember, I went back to the definition of why is Japan so safe and so clean? And I said to focus on the two words of values and personal responsibility. Same thing, right? This is a person that lacks core values and personal responsibility. And that is the very foundation that I believe makes Japan what it is, right? And to me, that is the cleanest and safest place that I've personally experienced to date. To me, they have integrity, have courage to align with that integrity. They have benevolence, right? Japanese are some of the kindest people that I've met and experienced, right? They have respect, they have honesty, right? This, you have to remember, this is a no tipping culture, right? They have honor and they have loyalty. And all of that is, ironically, the Bushido Code. So my takeaway is this, is very short, but impactful, I believe. So in order to live in a society like Japan that is clean and safe, we need to collectively align with values and principles. Each individual needs to take personal responsibility for their own actions. And the only way to do that is to reflect on what's currently driving your good behavior, and more importantly, what's rooted in your unwanted behavior, right? So that we can change those things. It is always around an egoic mind, which is the gap that we need to close to become our authentic self, right? Is the gap that we need to change. But it's always the fear of what others will think, what others will say, and what we believe, how other people will judge us, that holds us back from taking action, right? Life is a series of natural and spontaneous changes. We have to realize that change is the only constant in the world, right? So don't resist it. That only creates sorrow. Let reality be reality. Let things flow naturally towards what it's going to be. Let things flow naturally forward in whatever way that they likes to be, right? There are seasons and changes, and there's things that we have to react to, right? Remember, life is 10% what happens to you and 90% how you react and respond, right? I say react and respond because our first intuition is to react. But when we learn to take control and agency over our lives, we can actually respond. Slower version, right? Reacting is a fight or flight fear. Response is being able to be in the present moment and observe what's going on so that we can respond accordingly, right? And that can only be achieved when one believes in oneself. And when one believes in oneself, one doesn't try to convince others. When one is content with oneself, one doesn't need others' approval and opinions, right? When one accepts oneself, the whole world accepts him or her because they can see true alignment, true authenticity, and authenticity speaks volumes. And when you care about what other people think of you, you'll always be their prisoner. And the flame that burns twice as bright burns half as long. So we need to slow down and peel it back, right? You need to believe in your heart and soul that you're capable of big things. You have to believe that you matter and that you're special. And the only thing that is standing in your way is yourself. So remove your glass ceiling, part that, right? And you can do that by anchoring into your core values and your principles that will guide and govern your actions. And this is how you remove fear and scarcity from your life. And when we all do this, we can all live harmoniously, right? Because we'll be in harmony with the universe, which I believe at the core is true love. And this is how we can create a clean and safe society. Now you know, one love.
Today's episode was sponsored by Help to Love, a platform to open your mind, achieve mental agility, and integrate into the person that you're meant to be. With a wealth of resources and expert advice at your fingertips, Help to Love makes prioritizing your mental well-being easier than ever. It's a non-judgmental approach to mental wellness to help you design that 10x life you deserve. Sign up today at www.helptolove.com. Join the thousands of users who have already discovered the transformative power. Register for the free webinar that will open your mind and plant seeds for your ultimate breakthrough. If you felt this episode was helpful and insightful, please like, share, and subscribe so that you'll be notified of all of our upcoming content and special announcements. I'm E.O. Brooks, your host. As always, I thank you for your support and especially your time. One love.